The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Cut. Cut is a peer-to-peer social betting platform that's US-based and available in 40 states. Head to cut.com, that's KUTC.com, and use promo code SGPN for a 10% deposit bonus. We're also brought to you by Nordic Fantasy. Play their fantasy pick'em for a chance to win 100 times your money in NBA, NHL, college basketball, and more. Sign up today using promo code SGPN to get a 100% deposit match. We're also brought to you by Hall of Fame Bets, the sports fan research platform for parlays, player props, and game lines. Download the app or visit HOPENY.com. Use code SGPN to get 50% off your first month and start making smarter bets today. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is currently late Sunday night, roughly 11 p.m. Eastern Time on March 31st. I'm your host, as always, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Should be a bit of a longer episode because we have 3 tournaments to preview after dealing with a couple of Masters 1000 titles in America. Now we are officially switching over to European clay as we have 2 international clay tournaments, and we also have 1 taking place in Houston in America. So we're going to preview all 3. We're going to go chronological order based on when the matches start on Monday. So the order we're going to go with in this episode, we're going to preview Estoril first, then Marrakech, then we are going to preview Houston in that order. So the point is we're going to go through the outrights for each of those tournaments. We'll have to announce, though, we have no quarter odds, so quarter markets will not be a thing in this episode. Of course, you can infer from who I'm picking to actually win the overall event, who I do like in the quarters. But wanted to mention that we had no quarter odds for markets, so as a result, we are not going to be able to talk about those actual types of bets. Now, a reminder before we get into the actual recap of the last episode, a reminder to like and subscribe on YouTube. Also, a reminder to rate and review the podcast on Spotify or Apple. So regardless of how you are actually watching the podcast or listening to the podcast, please do your best to actually show your support for the show. Plus, a reminder to check out the SGPN merch store for Tennis Gambling Podcast merch. We have a bunch of great shirts for the show. We also have mugs, so a lot of merchandise to show your support for the show, and you can definitely find a lot of options on the SGPN merch store. Also a reminder, since I keep saying SGPN, we are brought to you by the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, and since it is in the middle of March Madness, I do want to at least mention the fact that they have a ton of great college basketball shows. They have the Sports Gambling Podcast flagship show with Sean and Ryan, where they're picking every single tournament game, like they have ATS since 2012. A reminder that we also have the college basketball experience with Kobe, with Ryan, and with Noah, as they're going to cover the college basketball extremely, extremely thoroughly for the rest of the event. And you're also looking at the 20-plus gambling shows that the network actually has for free for all of you to consume. So don't just follow the tennis show, follow the other shows with the network, and don't forget to subscribe to the Sports Game Podcast and the College Basketball Experience wherever you do get your podcasts. Anyway, now it's time to get into the actual recap of the last episode. We did preview the final on the men's side for Miami, and overall, we did very, very well. We got basically everything right for the episode. Starting off with the lock, we had Sinner to win comfortably in straight sets at minus 126. That worked out as Sinner ended up winning the first set in a bit of a struggle early on, and then he ended up dominating the second set as he won 6-1. So really never a sweat for the 2-0. Sinner got a lead early, and he ended up coasting from there. I thought Dimitrov might roll over if things went poorly for him early on, and he did, as he, I don't want to say quit the second set, but he got broken pretty easily, and he only won 1 game in the entire second set. As for the dog, though, we went with a player prop. We had Sinner under 5.5 aces at even money as that got there, as he ended up finishing with 4. Got off to a decent start serving. The first serve percentage, though, was not great throughout the match, which was something that I mentioned might happen based on the wind in Miami. But the point is, Sinner historically had struggled to actually ace Dimitrov, and that was the case once again. So we took the under based on head-to-head results and recent results because Sinner was not really acing many guys, and that worked out well as we ended up sweeping. So overall, nice episode for us. Not really anything else worth recapping. I am going to mention that Sinner is now officially the number 2 player in the world. He officially passed Alcaraz for number 2. So we'll see if he can end up catching Djokovic over the next couple of months. But now Sinner has officially leapfrogged Alcaraz, and I do think that is worth mentioning. But Sinner is incredible. There's really no way around it. He has still only lost 1 time in 2024. He's the best player in the world. I've stated it for a couple episodes at this point, and I feel like even if you want to use Indian Wells as a counterpoint, because Alcaraz did beat Sinner in that event, I can't argue with consistency, and Sinner has been so consistent, so dominant, and he might end up becoming I don't want to say the main face of tennis after Djokovic eventually retires or hits the past his prime portion of his career, because Alcaraz is always going to get the fan support based on the overall entertainment value and the crazy shots and highlights that he hits. Sinner and Alcaraz are going to go back and forth, but if I told you that Sinner ended up with a similar number of Grand Slam titles by the end of their careers, I don't think any of you would be shocked. So the point is, Sinner's been great. Wanted to mention it, and we got a very good price with him winning in straight sets. Props to Dimitrov, though. Made a good run. He's officially going to be returning to the top 10 for the first time in a long time, so good for him. But unfortunately, he ran into a buzzsaw in the name of Sinner, and as a result, he had no chance and ended up losing in straight sets. Anyway, time to actually get into the first tournament we are going to preview for this episode. We're going to go with Estoril first, starting off with the recent winners. We are going to look at those. So Ruud did win last year against Kecmanovic. Baez did beat Tiafoe. For reference, by the way, I am skipping a couple years here or there because of COVID. So if there was no event being held because of COVID, I didn't put COVID down on the list. I just skipped over it. So if some of these names sound dated, it's probably because a year or two were missed from COVID. But Baez beat Tiafoe, Ramos Vinolas beat Nori, and Tsitsipas did beat Cuevas in the past. So if you do want to look at the actual odds for this event, Ruud is trying to defend his title, as he's currently about plus 200. Odds are going to vary, but these are the odds that I have in front of me. Hurkacz is playing clay, which is interesting, but he is currently at 5-1. Fekina is at 9-1. Musetti's at 10-1. Monfils at 11-1. Kecmanovic is at 16-1. You have Fees at 16-1 as well. Garin at 22-1. Team at 25-1. Altmaier at 25-1. Martinez at 25-1. Batista Agut at 25-1. Borges at 25-1. Kempfer at 25-1. You kind of get my point, but I'll go through a couple more names. Fonseca at 25-1. Coria at 28-1. Think that's basically going to do it. So the point is, both finalists from last year are here, as Ruud and Kecmanovic made the trip to Portugal. So we're going to see how it actually unfolds with this actual tournament. Now, most people are going to lean to Ruud immediately because Ruud is the king of the clay 250s. Last couple years, though, he has not been as dominant in this type of tournament as he was earlier in his career. But the point is, we know that Ruud is a very good clay player. And you look at his overall titles, he has completely stocked his trophy shelf with 250s and is going to try to repeat the title here in Estoril. I really can't argue with it. I think I have to go with Ruud at plus 220 as my first outright pick. Reminder, we do have no quarters, so apologies, but I have to at least mention that we don't have any quarters. So I'm going to go with Ruud at plus 220. Tough to go against him. He's the best clay player here by a mile. Hurkacz has not played on clay in a while. You might remember we faded Hurkacz in the French Open last year with Varius, and that was a very nice plus money play for us. The point is, we know Hurkacz is not a great clay player. Definitely his weakest surface. Fekina is good on clay, but I don't trust him. Musetti's fine. I'll get to him in a second. Monfils hasn't played on clay in a while. I question the fitness as this tournament progresses. I'm not going to pick Kecmanovic, who has not been in great form recently. Fees has been a mess. Garin has been a mess for the last couple of years. Team I can't trust. The point is, there's a lot of question marks here with a decent portion of the field. Yes, Ruud was hit or miss in the hard court season, but he did make a couple of finals before losing. So his form has been good, just not good enough to win titles. Now he's going back to clay. He's won here before, and he's easily, once again, the best player here. I have to like 220. I think his draw is overall pretty good, and I do think his draw in general I think is pretty good, and that should help him get a couple of easy straight set victories in the first couple rounds, not to mention him having a bye in the first round. So give me Ruud at plus 220 as my first outright pick here in Estoril. My second pick is going to be Musetti. I'm going to take him at 10-1. Musetti's had an interesting start to the year because he was decent at the beginning, almost beat Bublik in that crazy match in Australia, ended up losing that one. But the point is, he got off to a decent start on hard court earlier this year. Then he hit a wall. He couldn't win a match for about a month and a half, but he was okay about a tournament or two ago, as he ended up losing to Alcaraz eventually in straight sets. Before that, though, beat Shelton at a couple of nice wins, and I'm hoping that builds some confidence for the clay season. And we know Musetti is definitely a clay, I don't want to say specialist, but I'd say a clay favoritist, if you want to use that term, if that's even a word. He definitely prefers clay. We know he did win a clay title a couple years ago in Hamburg, so I know that his talent is definitely there, and I do think that Musetti, with his overall skill set in a pretty weak field, can showcase his skills, and I think he can get the job done potentially. But I like 10-1. I think that he's in line for what could be a good showing, and I do think that you are looking at a guy who, I don't want to say he's in a buy low spot, but a guy that's kind of flying under the radar. And I do think if some of that momentum can carry over into this event, he might be very dangerous. Now, I mentioned a second ago, Ruud's overall draw does have a difficult match in the round of 16 because you face off against either Coria or Dzanchel, but I think Ruud would definitely get the better of either guy. Then probably Monfils, if I had to guess, but you're going down the line here, and Ruud's going to be favored in basically every match. So I have to pick Ruud based on how I'm looking at this draw. As for Musetti, his draw is pretty favorable as he has a bye, then a matchup against either Borges or Puy, then a matchup against either Garin or probably Fees, but who knows? The point is both guys have not exactly been good this year. Maybe you're looking at a shot for Musetti and Ruud to have a collision course, but I have to go based on odds, and I do think that you're looking at a guy at 10-1 who I think is definitely worth taking that gamble with. So to go through the potential path here, Ruud would be in the final, so hopefully Musetti and Ruud meet each other and we automatically win. But give me the two outrights for Estoril in Ruud at 220 and Musetti at 10-1. Moving on to the next event, we're going to talk about Marrakech. But before we actually get into any of that tournament, do want to take a quick word from our sponsor. We're also brought to you by Cut. Cut is a peer-to-peer social betting platform that's U.S.-based and available in 40 states. Peer-to-peer social betting is a new and better way to bet directly against your friends or other users on sports, politics, pop culture, and other events with verifiable outcomes, plus a ton of social features that give it the feel of a betting social network. Cut offers lower vig and fully customizable odds so you can create your own bets. Cut handles the payment side of things, so you never have to worry about chasing down your money. Social features include group chats, betting leaderboards, head-to-head history, user profiles, fan groups, and more. And they also have great rewards. Get cash back every single time you bet against your friends or other users. So download Cut today in the App Store or over at cut.com. That's Kutt, and use promo code SGPN for a 10% deposit bonus. We're also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is the place to play fantasy sports because it is the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. They have great pick'em games. For example, you can pick whether your favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total into their upcoming games. You can win up to 100 times your money in a single night. Pick between 2 and 5 players to build a pick'em entry, and you can also make rivals picks, which pits 2 players against each other, so you can pick which player you think might have more points, for example, in an NBA game. But a reminder that you should also join Underdog Fantasy because they have a lot of very fun markets for tennis. They have, for example, breaks of serve, they have aces, they have a lot of fun tennis options to make matches more interesting, and I recommend you joining the platform in order to take advantage of those opportunities. So sign up today with promo code SGPN to get your first deposit doubled up to $100, as well as an instant pick'em special. Visit underdogfantasy.com or find them on the App Store, and don't forget to register with the promo code SGPN to get your first deposit doubled up to $100, as well as an instant pick'em special. Must be 18 plus and present in the state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concern with your play? Call 1-800-522-4700 or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished previewing Estoril. Now it's time to move on to Marrakech. So looking at this overall tournament, to start off with the recent winners, you had Baena, who beat Muller last year. Goffin beat Mulcan. You had Pair beating Andujar beating Edmund, and George beating Kohlschreiber. A reminder, I might have skipped over the COVID years. But still, point is a lot of, I don't want to say forgettable names because that sounds disrespectful, but a lot of names that you haven't really heard in a while, and a lot of names that you might not be overly impressed with in the ATP Tour right now. So the point is this event is kind of wide open, and it always has been. So I know Baena was a massive long shot last year, and so was Muller, and Baena ended up getting the job done. So we'll see if this event follows the same long shot, I'd say, tendencies that we've seen in the past. Starting off, though, with the favorite for this event, you do have Berrettini, of all people, who are favored at roughly plus 550. You're looking at De Gier at 6-1. You have Sonego at 7-1. Baena trying to defend his title at 10-1. Kotov's at 12-1. Evans at 12-1. Diaz Acosta at 12-1. Navone at 12-1. Offner at 12-1. Kaboli at 16-1. Mutet at 16-1. Warenka at 16-1. You have Rinderknich at 20-1. Shevchenko at 20-1. Mueller at 20-1. Benash at 22-1 as well. You're looking at Munar at 25-1, Gaston at 28-1, Nagal at 33-1, Ramos Vinolas at 33-1, and you kind of get the point. Now, once again, I think you can tell based on how I just described this event and how up in the air it usually is, there's no way in hell I'm taking Berrettini to win this event at plus 550. First of all, he has not really played much tennis in general since getting injured. He's been rehabbing, and we ended up seeing him make a deep run. I think it was in Phoenix before losing in the final to Borges. But he's not played much clay either. Now, if he was fully healthy, I would take him because Berrettini is a solid clay player. But I can't take him based on current form. I haven't seen him play on clay, and I haven't seen him stay healthy for a couple of weeks in a row at this point. So I can't take Berrettini. I think that if I was going to take him, it would be closer to the, say, 9-1 range. But 550 favorite, that I cannot do based on his lack of consistent durability and his lack of overall consistency. Too much uncertainty. If he wins the event, good for him. I'll be happy for him, but I just can't take him based on his lack, I'd say, of recent results. I think that's going to leave a lot to be desired. So I'm going to pass on Berrettini. De Gier is the second favorite, so you really know what type of tournament we're dealing with. De Gier has been fine on clay in his career, has really not played on clay much recently. Decent draw, though, by then Gaston, then either Kaboli, Shelby, Ben Shatrit, or Kotov. So, De Gier actually has a pretty good draw if you wanted to make a case for him, but I'm not going to. I just think at the end of the day, I'm going to go with the guy who's in his overall half that I like more based on his overall form and based on price. I get why De Gier is cheap because his draw is pretty favorable, and he really should walk into the quarters. So keep an eye out for him. Potentially, I'm not going to take him, though. I think his overall game can be a little bit streaky at times, and that's why I don't really trust him to win an event at 6-1. Sonego I'm not going to take because I can't trust him either. The talent is there, but he really has been underwhelming so far in 2024, so I'm going to stay away from him. Baena, I'm not going to take. He's been pretty rough so far this season as well, so I'm going to not pick a repeat winner, especially when a Cinderella wins it the first time. I'm just not going to pick you to do it again. And you're looking at Kotov, who I've not been overly impressed with again this year. Same with Evans. But then we get to Diaz Acosta. And Diaz Acosta is pretty interesting because I do think even though he is still pretty young, we know what his upside is. He already won a clay title this year in Argentina. And when you're looking at his overall odds, I think 12-1 is really good. I think 12-1 is a very good price for what should be a pretty up-in-the-air event. If you want to look at his overall draw, pretty favorable. Qualifier in round 1, then either Rinderknich or qualifier in round 2, then either Baena or Evans in round 3. That's pretty good for Diaz Acosta, and we know what his upside can be. We know that his topspin can really make it uncomfortable for players, and I do think that his overall lefty, I'd say, form can definitely throw some players off balance, but I mean, you're going through the overall draw here, and in the semis, he'd have to face off against potentially De Gier. He can save Berrettini for the final, which I do like, and I do think when you're looking at a guy who has clearly been in great form on clay so far this season, 12-1 with a pretty favorable draw, I think is a very appealing option. So I'm going to go with Diaz Acosta at 12-1 to win his second ATP title of the season. And my second pick, I'm only going to go with 2 outrights in this event, is going to be an even longer shot. I am going to go with another Argentinian player. I'm going to take a guy that made the final and ended up getting destroyed by Baez. I'm going to go with Navone at 25-1. I think 25-1 really does not make any sense, especially when you shop around, because I see BetMGM, for example, has Navone at 12-1. But BetMGM went rogue. BetMGM has Navone at 25-1. So even regardless of how good the player is, if you're going to give me one book with double the odds of another book, I'm going to take it because clearly one market or one book fell asleep, and Bet365 definitely fell asleep. Because market-wide, you can find 12-1, 13-1, and BetMGM just decided, you know what, 25-1. We're going to see what happens. Now, do I think Navone is good enough to win the event? Maybe not, but based on the odds and based on the fact that he made a deep run in Rio, I do think that he's in line for what could be a nice I don't want to call it a Cinderella run, but a nice repeat run of what he had in Rio. Maybe a couple breaks go his way with regard to the actual draw, and you are looking at a guy at a pretty good price compared to the rest of the market, who I know can do well in clay events, especially on the ATP level, because he was just solid on it on a pretty big event, an ATP 500, and he was able to make the final. So I do think when you're looking at a value option at 25 to 1, it's a great value price. Now, if you don't have Bet365, apologies, but I have to at least mention all the books that actually have available lines for this market. And when you make, once again, the final of 500 and get you a 25 to 1, and you're facing off against a random qualifier in the first round that you're minus 345 to beat, and your second round matchup will be either against Ramos Vinolas or Wawrinka, they might kill each other. We'll see what happens. But the 2 seed, the player with the bye in his section, is Offner, who's been a mess this year. A lot to like about the draw for Navone. If he can get past Ramos Vinolas or Wawrinka, I like his draw. I think that he's in line for a good performance against Offner, who's been a mess this season. At 25 to 1 is a very good price. Give me the long shot here with Navone by shopping around. So once again, my 2 picks for this overall tournament was not overly sold on the favorites. If I had to pick one favorite, probably would be De Gere, just solely based on draw. But I am going to go with Diaz Acosta at plus 1,200, and I am going to go with Navone at 25 to 1. Moving on to Houston, which is one of the ugliest tournaments of the entire year. The clay looks like dirt. That was one of the issues with Estoril as well. I heard a lot of people were not happy with the clay quality, so keep an eye on that moving forward for this event. Forgot to mention that. But for Houston, it is one of the worst ATP events of the calendar year in terms of court quality. So expect to see a lot of really ugly-looking dirt courts that are allegedly clay. But anyway, recent winners. Tiafoe beat Etcheverry last year. You saw Opelka beat Isner. Garin beat Rude. You saw Johnson beat Sandgren, and Johnson beat Bellucci. Once again, COVID did cut into that, but a couple of names from the past. Decent amount of Americans doing well with Tiafoe, Opelka, and Johnson twice. So 4 of the last 5 winners minimum have been American, if you do care about that. Now, for the actual odds to win the event, a lot of players who are very, I'd say, well-known names. The problem is not many players that are actually good on clay. So to go through the actual odds here, the favorite in the event is Ben Shelton. Co-favorites, technically. Ben Shelton, who rarely, if ever, plays clay, is the favorite to win the event. So that tells you where we're at in Houston. Tiafoe, looking to defend his title, is plus 450. Etcheverry, trying to get revenge from last year's title loss, is plus 500. Cerundolo, the good one, is 7 to 1. You have Shapo at 12 to 1. Dartery, who is 12 to 1. You have Mickelson at 14 to 1. You have Nakashima at 16 to 1. You have Kokkinakis at 16 to 1. Kokkinakis on clay. Yeah, sure. 16 to 1. You have Thompson at 16 to 1. Or is that 18 to 1. You have Eubanks at 22 to 1. Galan at 22 to 1. Varius at 25 to 1. Giron 25 to 1. Wolf at 25 to 1. And a bunch of other long shots who I'm really not interested in. You get my point. It is a really, really weird tournament because you usually have a couple of players who simply stuck around in America after the 1,000 events and decided to try to play a clay event. So they're going to try to play it, but in reality, the clay sucks here, and we're going to see a lot of really ugly-looking matches that might be competitive, but the court quality is definitely going to be in doubt, let's put it that way, for this tournament. But for the sake of the overall odds here, also worth mentioning, Benoit pair sighting at plus 5,000 to win the event. For the sake of the overall tournament, though, I'm not going to take Shelton. He doesn't play enough clay. Tiafoe, I thought about. I think he can make a decent run here because he already won this event, but he's been really bad this year. So I have a hard time fully trusting him. Etcheverry, I would have taken, but he's been injured. Really has not played much tennis since he got injured in, I believe it was Santiago, I think, where he got injured in the Jari match. Has really not played much since. Lost to Murray in Indian Wells and has not really played since. So the point is, Etcheverry I would have taken, but unfortunately, I have not seen him play enough, and I really don't know how healthy he actually is. So I don't think I can take him. I just think at the end of the day, he is that wasn't Indian Wells. He lost to Murray in straight sets in Miami. You get my point, though. Point is, I don't trust Etcheverry's health right now. So if you want to take him, be my guest. He would be the favorite I would pick if he was fully healthy, but I just don't have that answer. So Cerundolo is going to be my first pick at 7-1. Now, the issue with this event is that because I ended up going with the players that I thought were mispriced, two of them are in line for a collision course almost immediately. So one of these outrights might lose very quickly. Now, Cerundolo at 7-1, I am going to take. He's a guy that's pretty good on all surfaces, but I think he's definitely at his best on clay. He was really bad a couple months ago, but then we saw him make a deep run in Rio before losing to Baez in the semis. And since then, he's been fine. Went to Indian Wells, beat Shevchenko, lost a marathon match to Shelton, went to Miami, beat Offner, and then ended up losing to Kashanov in a final set breaker. Point is, he seems to have regained his form, and based on that, I do think he's talented enough to out-hit anybody on clay. I like his overall game, and I think that you're looking at a guy who can make a decent amount of noise if he's able to get past his second-round matchup, which should be difficult. And speaking of which, I'm going to take that guy as well. Give me Dartery at 18-1. Shopped around, I do think at the end of the day, you're looking at a guy who is a very solid clay player for a youngster. We saw him win his first ever ATP event earlier this year, so I know he definitely can handle it. But I do think his game can lead to him being a pretty dangerous dark horse candidate to actually win this event. And you're looking at his overall form recently. It's been fine. I'll admit it was better when he was actually winning an ATP title, but he was in Santiago, ended up beating the other Cerundolo in 3, lost to Bilo, ended up facing off against Chapo in Miami and lost in 3. But the point is he's been fine, beat Bagnis in 3 sets in Santiago, which was a rematch of the final that they had in Cordoba, where he won the event. But you get my point. The point is, though, Dartery is a very good clay player, and I do think you're looking at a guy who can be dangerous at 18-1. The problem is the draw, which I mentioned before, but you're looking at the overall draw for Cerundolo and for Dartery. They're in line to face off against each other in the round of 16, which does suck, but the winner would face off against either Giron, Chapo, Wolf, or Richard. So you're assuming that the winner will end up going to the quarters of whoever wins that Dartery and Cerundolo match. So I think that's going to definitely help out. But I do think when you're looking at this overall tournament, it makes sense to take some flyers. If you want to go for an American, Tiafoe would probably be my pick, but I just don't trust his current form. And I think that with the upside that both Cerundolo and Dartery possess, I have to at least acknowledge that either one of them can be dangerous. Their semifinal matchup would be either against like Tiafoe or Kokkinakis or Thompson, like really nobody worth a damn in their half. So I like the chances of one of them making a deep run here, and as a result, I am going to go with both of them, both Cerundolo and Dartery at their respective prices of 7-1 and 18-1. My last pick will be a long shot. We've done pretty well with the clay long shots. We have seen that clay so far this season, and overall, just the ATP landscape in general. A lot of Cinderella runs to the final. They might not have won all of the finals, but they made deep runs. And Clay's been no exception to that. So I am going to go with a long shot, a guy that has done us very, I'd say a guy that's done us a lot of favors on this podcast in years past. Going to go with Varillas at 25-1. Now, Varillas was in really bad form, did fade him a couple of months ago, as we ended up taking him to lose to Ramos Vinolas in an event, and Ramos Vinolas did win in 3 sets. Varillas, though, while everyone was playing the ATP hard courts for the 1000s, etc., Varillas was grinding in the clay challengers, and I do like that. I think that when a guy is struggling with his overall form, you want to make sure that he's A, accustomed to the surface, and B, not really taking any time off. And I do like the fact that Varillas has been working on his craft against weaker competition. I think that's a good look for him, and I think that might make him dangerous in this overall matchup now, or tournament. Now, you're looking at how he's done recently on clay, ended up making a pretty decent showing there in Santiago, as he ended up, in Santiago, he lost to Baez in 3. No shame in that. They went to Santiago for a challenger event and ended up making a very deep run. In fact, he ended up winning the entire tournament as he beat Bagnis in the final. Then he went to Paraguay and he ended up making a deep run, lost to Heidi in his 4th match there. So he won a title in Santiago Challenger, then ended up making a deep run in Paraguay, then went to Brazil and ended up making a deep run once again before losing in 3. But the point is he has done well on clay challengers recently. He ended up playing on the 30th, so he has been playing some clay tennis recently. Cannot say the same for a lot of the favorites in this field, which makes me think that Varius can be quite dangerous in this overall tournament if his game is on. And with him getting the reps in, I'm hoping he's on. And I think with that being the case, 25-1 is a good deal. So to go through his overall draw for this event is a matchup against Mo in the first round, then Mickelson or Purcell, definitely not clay guys. Then Echeverry or Galan or Pair. That might be tricky, but once again, I'm going to doubt Echeverry's health at this point, and I'm going to take a flyer on a guy who I think can make life difficult, or at least more difficult than the odds makers suggest for others. Now, Varius, to quickly just go through the rest of the path here, I mentioned you would face Echeverry in the quarters, then potentially Shelton, sure, a bunch of non-clay specialists, and then the final would be everybody else left over. But you get my point. 25-1 for a guy that's been busy with clay challengers who we know can showcase his skills on clay, beat Hurkacz in the French Open last year, for example, made a good run there before losing to Djokovic. I just think this price is off, and with that being the case, I am going to go with a fun flyer. Give me Varius at 25-1. So once again, my picks for all three of the events taking place this week. For Estoril, I'm going to go with Ruud at 220, and I am going to go with Musetti at 10-1. For Marrakech, I am going to go with Diaz Acosta at 12-1, and I am going to go with Navone at 25-1. And for Houston, I am going to go with Cerundolo at 7-1. I'm going to go with Dargari at 18-1, and I am going to go with Varius at 25-1. That's going to wrap it up for the actual outrights. Now it's time for the actual lock and dog picks for the individual matches in these three events. But before we continue that, I do want to take one more quick word from our sponsor.
We're also brought to you by Hall of Fame Bets. Win bigger betting smarter this NBA season with Hall of Fame Bets. Sports Analytics platform for parlays, player props, and game lines. Research every NBA and soccer bet with historical stats and data. Enter any parlay idea into Hall of Fame Bets' revolutionary parlay optimizer tool to get hit rates broken down by leg, as well as an expected probability for the entire parlay. Sort all players by hit rate for any bet to learn which players are hot and which picks have value. Stop betting in the dark and join over 30,000 users researching with Hall of Fame Bets to craft more intelligent, data-driven parlays. Download the app or visit HOPETS.com. Use code SGPN to get 50% off your first month today. Start researching, start winning with Hall of Fame Bets.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished previewing the three ATP events this week, Estoril, Houston, and Marrakech. Now it's time to get into the actual lock and dog picks for some matches. Starting off with the lock, I am going to first announce that there is no time crunch here. I know I'm recording this late on Sunday. These two matches are taking place on Tuesday, not Monday, so no rush at all. You can take your time to get your bets in. For the lock, I am going to go to Estoril, though. I'm going to go to a matchup between Coria and Dzanchulp, and I am going to go with Coria on the money line at minus 115. Simply put, you're going to give me a guy that's been very accustomed to playing clay events, while his opponent has not. Coria, we saw, have a pretty respectable clay season so far in the ATP level, and he also, like Varius, has been playing a lot of clay challenger events, so he should be ready to roll for this overall event. As for Dzanchulp, he really has not. Dzanchulp has not played a single clay match since last year's French Open. 0. So he's not played a clay match in basically 10 months, give or take. Good luck. I think that once again, I mentioned this before, I cannot overestimate the amount of, I just say the amount of difficulty with regard to changing surfaces. If you're used to playing on hard court, you have to play clay. It might take a match or two before you fully make the adjust, either mentally or physically. Dzanchulp really does not play much clay. And with that being the case, I think he's in line to struggle, not to mention the fact he has not been very good this year. And Coria has actually been very good on clay so far this year. So I think minus 115 is a pretty generous price. Give me the active clay specialist against a guy that really does not play any clay whatsoever and a guy who has not been in great form this year. Give me Coria on the money line at minus 115 as my lock. For my dog, I am going to go to a fun match in Houston between Varius and Mo, and I am going to go with Varius to win in straight sets at plus 125. Varius, I mentioned before, has been pretty involved in challengers, and he's been very good. He has won 11 of his last 13 clay matches, so he was in bad form, regained some confidence in the challenger level, and I think he's in line to showcase that confidence into this clay ATP event. Now, Mo, I mentioned a second ago, Dzanchulp has not played a clay match since the French Open. Mo said hold my beer, because Mo has played one clay match since the 2022 French Open. And that was the 2023 French Open. So when you play one clay match in basically 2 years, I'm not going to pick you to look good on clay. And I think looking at Mo in general, he's fine, pretty decent player, but you're looking at a guy who really never, if ever, plays clay. And because of that, I think he's vulnerable in the first round to lose. There's a reason why Varius is a decent favorite at like minus 160. And I do think Mo is going to take some time to adjust to the surface. Varius won't, and I do think he'll eventually be able to wear down Mo in these two sets. But plus 125, fading a guy that's played one clay match in basically 2 years, I think is a great deal. Give me Varius in straight sets at plus 125. So once again, my picks of the show, the lock's going to be on Coria, money line at minus 115, and my dog will be on Varius to win in straight sets at plus 125. So the common theme here, fade the guys who have not played any clay recently, and that's going to be my approach for this episode. But anyway, before we officially wrap up, a reminder of what's going to happen next episode. We'll be back once again for the quarters in Estoril, in Houston, and in Marrakech. So stay tuned for that. But until next time, find me on Twitter at Red Show Radio. Find me on the NBA show. Find me on the MLB show. Find me on the NFL show. You get the point. Until next time, though, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.